Hello, welcome back to the Long Distance Love Bombs podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jeremy Goldberg, and today's guest is Sarah Edmondson. Sarah is an actress. She's a voiceover actress. She's been featured on the Hallmark channel in a couple of those films. She's been the voice of several animated series, but we're not going to talk about any of that really in this conversation. Sarah is also one of the main figures in a documentary called The Vow, which is a 9-part HBO series about a sex cult. She is a whistleblower that was interviewed by the FBI. She was featured on the front page of the New York Times. She is recently an author who wrote a kind of tell-all kind of memoir about her experience working for more than a decade in the cult called NXIVM, whose founder is now in prison. Various others are in prison as well. And in this conversation, we don't necessarily focus upon the details of her experience inside of the cult as much as we discuss what she learned from it, how she healed from it, how it shaped her, how it changed her, what it was like. This conversation is quite different than any that I've ever had. I don't know about you, but I don't have too many chats with people that were whistleblowers in an international sex cult. So this is a new one for me. In saying that, Sarah and I hit it off. We're a kindred spirit, as she suggests. At some point, she confides in me that I would have been the perfect target for the cult, and I admit that I would have gladly joined. So this is an interesting conversation about a topic that isn't often discussed. I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that you take away the various lessons from it related to shame, forgiveness, guilt, regret, responsibility. There's a lot to learn in here, a lot of interesting conversation. And also, if you have time and you want to follow up, the 9-part series on HBO called The Vow is outrageously interesting. Highly recommend it. I read her book. I watched it. All right, that's enough. Without further ado, here is Sarah Edmondson. This episode is brought to you by Cured Nutrition. Cured is the leader in CBD supplementation with an entire line of products designed to take your everyday life to its ultimate potential. Their daily staples are formulated with an in-house clinical herbalist, which has taken the traditional CBD regimen to an entirely new level of optimization. If you're anything like me, you like waking up feeling good and living well. You've probably toyed around with the idea of finding healthy alternatives to jumpstart your morning. Personally, it's why I start my day with Cured Rise, which is their focus supplement. It's a powerhouse blend of functional mushrooms like lion's mane and cordyceps, broad-spectrum CBD, and powerful adaptogens. It gives me clean, clear, and sustained energy without any of the caffeine jitters or crash that I get with coffee. After I get going, Aura is next. It's another blend of functional mushrooms, CBD, and adaptogens, but it's got a twist. We all know how important it is to sustain our immunity nowadays, and this covers all of my bases. The vitamin D, prebiotics, crucial antioxidants are delivered straight to the gut, which is the foundation of our emotional and physical health. Am I right? Second brain. It's where the majority of our serotonin production and immune function begin, or it keeps everything in check, performing at its best. So I have one less thing to worry about, and I obviously cannot forget Zen. I use it every night. It is certainly why it has become Cure's #1 selling relaxation and sleep product. You know the long nights spent tossing and turning? Yeah, not with this stuff. It has ingredients like reishi mushroom, ashwagandha, magnesium, passion flower, broad spectrum CBD. So thankfully, restlessness is something of the past. Cured Nutrition products are your answer for a daily dose of health. Visit curednutrition.com. That's CURED nutrition.com. Be sure to use the coupon code LOVEBOMBS, and at the checkout you will save 10% off your order. No, get that robot to announce that I'm recording it. Okay. Sarah Edmondson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.
I'm super excited to talk to you. You are far and away the guest that I have done the most research about. I've read your book. I've watched a 9-hour documentary about your life. I feel like we're friends now.
Yeah, whether you like it or not.
Whether I like it or not. But for those who have no idea who Sarah Edmondson is, what you're doing here, can you talk a little bit about who you are? What's your deal?
Sure. I'm going to give you the abridged version. Yes.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm from Canada, born and raised in Vancouver. I'm an actor. My parents are therapists. Tells you a little bit about me right there. My mom's a family therapist. My dad's a counselor, but both of them are in that world. In the mid 2000s, so 2005, I'd been an aspiring actor for about a decade at that time. And I met a director named Mark Vicente, who directed the film called What the Bleep Do We Know? And long story short, I admired him. I wanted to make movies like him that, conscious shifting media. And he said, well, if you like my film, you'd like this class I just took. And I just followed along blindly, didn't research, took a workshop through him that was at the time was called Executive Success Programs. It really, I was very skeptical at first, but ultimately I loved the first 5-day training. I told everybody I knew. I took the tools, put them in my life, became a very zealoty recruiter for them, opened up a school in Vancouver, traveled back and forth to New York, but mostly just ran my little satellite school in Vancouver. And over the years, there were many things that were problematic or red flags for me that I basically was trained to dismiss as my own fears or my control issues, and ultimately never addressed those concerns until 12 years later, when I can swear on this, right?
Yeah.
Okay. When ultimately shit just got so crazy and weird that I knew I needed to get out. And long story short, I was invited into a secret women's group inside this group. And that was the eventual demise of not only my time with what was eventually called Nexium, but I also realized when I left, I couldn't just leave. I had to help free the other women that were essentially stuck there as slaves, and to expose the leadership for who they really were, which is essentially the leader, I realized, was not only a con man, but a narcissist and a sociopath and a sex addict. And we realized that not just me, myself, my husband, and Mark, the person who brought me in that I mentioned at the beginning, and his wife, and the mother of one of the women that was still involved, the 5 of us essentially decided that we had to not only expose the leadership, but dismantle the organization because of what was actually happening behind closed doors. So we went to the authorities. They didn't do anything. We went to the media. There's a picture of myself on the front page of the New York Times, which eventually initiated a investigation in a different district in New York than the district that I initially went to with my concerns. And that started a bigger investigation and eventually got the leader in jail for 120 years. And the rest of the women and the women around him have recently been sentenced. There's 2 more sentences to happen, but this chapter of my life is almost closed. The organization no longer exists. There's about 50 people who believe that Keith is, I'm exaggerating, but the Messiah. They still believe Keith is good, and that myself and the others who left are bad. And we just wanted to, create a fuss for a book deal is essentially how they've reframed this debacle in their mind. So it's not totally over for me. It's not going to be completely over until everyone is out and awake. But for me, in terms of my healing and my journey, I've been out for 4 years. My life now is essentially educating others on what cults or groups that use coercive control and undue influence look like, so that they can avoid it, helping people get out, helping people heal through my book, through The Vow. And also my husband and I now have a podcast called A Little Bit Culty. And that's been my journey from going from being somebody who really wanted to help people, betting on the wrong horse with this, this personal development program, which I don't even think I explained. That's what the course was, personal development. And now I can actually help people in a way that's much more meaningful and legitimate. So that's the brief version of my story.
Yeah. Yes. It was good. It was good. And so allow me to attempt to summarize that. So you were an actress, you found the personal development path through this organization that was really offering you beneficial insights and helping you and helping you live your dreams. It turns out that about several years in, you had some inklings or red flags that things didn't seem right, but everybody was into it and you were still having benefits. And so you kind of ignored those, or you were manipulated to ignore those. Eventually shit hit the fan. You realized that you're in a cult, and then you were in like the inner circle of the leadership of the cult, sort of at the high levels. You were brought into I don't know what you would call that women's group, whereby you were branded. I don't think you mentioned that.
No, I didn't mention that. That was big part of the wake up. Yeah.
So maybe we could touch on that in a moment. And then, sure. And then basically you were a whistleblower who brought down a sex cult. You were featured in the front page of the New York Times. You were interviewed by the FBI. You have written a book that's amazing that I've read. And your story, you're kind of like the lead character in a 9-part documentary on HBO called The Vow, which is also extremely well done. And now you're a podcast host and an advocate, an activist, informing people about the dangers of cults.
That's a good summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll take it.
Okay. And so I know that for those listening, if you want to know more about the actual details, read her book and watch The Vow. You'll get all of that and a real intimate, vulnerable, behind the scenes, detailed explanation of that. And as I mentioned, Sarah, I'm particularly interested in the after effects of that, because I feel like I know what happened and I know pretty much why it occurred. And I suppose I'm interested in the when the dust settles, kind of how you touched on various large themes in your book about forgiveness and regret and shame and self-judgment, etc. And I thought one place to start might be this quote that Mark said in the documentary, which is, people don't join a cult, they join a good thing. And I feel like that's how it originated for you. And so I'm curious, I suppose the question is, you had these intuitive gut feelings that something wasn't quite right for many years. And then at some point you decided to act on those intuitive hits, right? And so what was that process like? Because I talked to a lot of people that their heart is telling them something, their gut is telling them something, but then their brain is justifying it, excusing it, telling them they're crazy, that it's just fear, right? So there's that heart versus head battle. How did you navigate that?
That's a great question. It's important for me because this was something that was addressed on day one of my first training. And the next team leadership was really good at this. In fact, they trained me to do the same thing, which is to tell people, and this is what I was told, is essentially what they call the double bind and also a preempt. So this is something you learn in sales as well. So they said when we first got there, first of all, this is a success program. All successful people want to understand and know where they're limited, correct? And everyone goes, yeah, of course. You're a coach. You probably, say something similar. So we're looking at your areas of limitation. When you hit those things, it's going to be uncomfortable. No pain, no gain, right? So we're hitting up against areas of discomfort. When you're out of your comfort zone, it's uncomfortable. There's absolute truth in that. So they would say, we're going to talk about things in this conference room, and you're going to feel the urge to bolt, to leave. And we're asking people to stick through that, to work through that discomfort so that you can work through your issues that you just paid a lot of money to work through. That's why you're here. So that preempt means that when you have the urge to leave and you're uncomfortable, if you buy into that from the beginning, and not everybody does, I'd say one person in every training would be like, nope, I'm uncomfortable. I don't like that you're wearing sashes. I don't like you're telling me to call the leader Vanguard. And they would leave. And we'd be like, oh, isn't it sad that they can't even talk about these things in a training room. Like that's how it was framed for us. Like, well, I guess they're just not ready to work on their issues, or they're suppressive. There's somebody who it's like they're a bad apple. It's better that they're not here, ruining it for the rest of us. So it was that kind of mentality. So I had so many red flags on day one. Day one, I was like, this is fucking weird. This is bizarre. I don't want to be a part of this. But then that was overridden by, okay, but I paid a lot of money and they said I'm going to be uncomfortable. And what could happen? What's the worst that can happen if I just sit here, and see what it's about? Work, just ride it out, And I also have Mark's voice in my ear, and I have no blame towards him because he didn't know. But his voice saying, just wait till day three. I know it's weird. I was weirded out. And I said this to so many hundreds of people. It's totally weird. Day one, you're going to feel super uncomfortable. It'll all make sense by day three. Now, what I didn't know, and I've since learned through my cult education, is you can be indoctrinated into a new belief system if you're focused and you're open and you're listening to the teacher in 3 days. It doesn't take long to adopt a whole new way of thinking. Not like, going from Christianity to Judaism, like that kind of belief system, but your belief system about basic concepts that we covered. We were there for 12 hours a day for 5 days. And we built upon foundational concepts in our belief system that if you accept those things, you're basically screwed. I didn't know that, of course. And that became the framework for everything from then on. I would have a feeling and I would usually go to Mark or somebody above me, because you weren't, just like in any leadership, it was discouraged to share concerns with people below or of your same rank. You're supposed to go up. Does that make sense? It was like a ranking system.
Hierarchy.
Yeah, hierarchy, like a military. So naturally, if I'm going up, I was going to be gaslit. Another term I didn't even know till I left. So if I said, it's weird that blah, 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 blah. And they'd say, well, it seems like you're just like, you're really needing to know and to control things. Like what would happen if you just trusted the process? And I'd be like, oh, right. I'm controlling. Okay. I'll just trust the process, So I subscribed to a couple assumptions. One is that in this authority system, the people above me knew better than me. Right. Then that's something that I really warn people about is, of course, if you're going to go to school and you're making somebody else the authority and teaching you something, and you have to have that to a degree if you're learning something new, but you have to be careful about also trusting your own gut. And that's been a huge part of my healing process, is learning to trust my instincts again, because your instincts and your gut and your intuition, all these things are tell you things. But if you're trained to go, I'm not going to listen to that because of growth, or I'm not going to listen to that because I have to push through it because somebody else knows better, or all the reasons we override our gut instincts. These are, and this doesn't happen in cults. It happens, like a young person going to a party for the first time and people are saying, it's okay, I've only had a couple drinks, get in the car. And someone's going, I really don't want to. What's wrong? Like, what are you, a wimp? What are you, a pussy? And then you get in the car and you get in, there's an accident, but your gut instinct said no, but you do it for some other reason, right? To be liked, to be part of things, all sorts of reasons. So I tangented. I hope I answered your question, but that answer that for you?
Yeah, you were taught not to trust your intuition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In a very strategic and manipulative manner. And it was interesting watching the documentary, because I felt like it talks about and it shows a lot of the footage of the teachings and the lessons and the workshops. And I found myself kind of nodding along of like, oh yeah, that's a good point. Oh, that's a good point. And then something would happen and I'd be like, oh God, no. Like, yeah, it's almost like Darth Vader has like access to the Force, but used it in an evil manner.
100%.
Is what it was like, oh, you like the majority of it I was agreeing with. And I've taught myself like, oh yeah, beliefs, limiting beliefs, fear versus danger, like all of these things. But then it took this kind of hard right. Yeah. It was really difficult to watch. Oh, for sure. Especially for somebody like you in that field, and you're looking at the nuggets of truth. Because this is the thing that Keith was really good at in a brilliant, manipulative Darth Vader way, is taking these nuggets of truth from the universe, from Buddhism and from actual methodologies like, NLP and cognitive behavioral therapy and
it seems also Scientology from what I've researched. And all of these things, like even Scientology, there's obviously good things in the outside that draw people in and keep people in. People don't just join if it's bullshit from the beginning, right? There has to be good stuff. And he put together this package, like the 5-day for me, and I think for a lot of people, and why a lot of people, even people that I know now, are like, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't go past the 5-day, because they're like, I got a lot of value out of my 5-day. I got my money's worth, because it really looked at your, we called it your operating system, and trying to find the glitches so that you could operate more effectively in the world. And that is something that I've since learned, is that there's, the worst lies are surrounded in so much truth. And part of my healing has also been figuring out where these things came from, so I can still use them in my life and not throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is what a lot of people have done. Like, oh, that's all learnings from Keith. It's all like, it's toxic. It's full of shit. I've got to just get rid of it. But I'm like, well, no, but it takes a lot of work to pull it all apart.
And I can imagine that's true. And so, like, what is your process for that? How are you navigating that?
With a mixture of therapists who are experts in cults, and then like just regular normal therapists and counselors. And because of the work that I did in terms of understanding the human psychodynamic, partly from my parents and then also through NXIVM, being able to be aware of what I'm saying and what belief is holding that in place. For example, like in couples counseling, my husband and I are in couples counseling recently, I recognized what came up for me is that I had trouble asking for like what I felt like I needed in the relationship. And then I said to the therapist, okay, alert, this is old NXIVM training. Okay, here's one of the things we were taught, that we don't have needs other than food, shelter, water, like survival-based needs. And anything else, connection, love, support, community, financial security, anything else on top of that was called a desire or a non-integrated fixation.
Oh,
yes, I know, right?
Non-integrated fixation.
Yeah. So it's based on a disintegration. In other words, we don't actually need that thing to be happy. We just think we do. And that disintegration causes suffering because we're never happy until we have the thing. And in a Buddhist way, there's truth in that. Like if I think I'm never going to be happy until I have met the love of my life or have the perfect career or the perfect home or the perfect body, then I will be miserable. Right. So he takes a beautiful nugget, a Buddhist nugget about non-attachment, and makes it into something that I now feel bad if I have a desire for a career. And when I get the job or I start the relationship, I go, oh shit, is this just covering up my deficiency? Is this something that I'm not actually, I'm happy, but I'm not really happy. And I shouldn't be happy because this is just a non-integrated fixation. So there's like the good and the bad of it. So understanding that, for example, is really important. And we say, how do I navigate it? I have to say to my therapist, okay, so now I feel like I need something, but it's okay. I know it's not a need. I'm not going to die with it, but I really want this in the relationship, but I can't ask for it because it points to a fixation. So I just have to talk it out. I gotta go, like, is that true? Like, is that true? Like, is it okay for me to want something like a connection or communication or affection or something? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's how I navigate it, is just talking about it and going, okay, why do I think this is true? I think this is true because I learned that on day 1 of the 5-day. I learned that on day 1. It's not okay to be anything you want other than a basic survival need is a deficiency.
Yeah. And I imagine what might be particularly challenging is that you're essentially doing now what you had to do then, which is I have an operating system. I want to live in a certain way. I have certain blind spots that others are going to help me identify. I get to work on a couple of things. I get to feel uncomfortable, right? And so you're being asked to trust this process,
yes,
but not the previous process, even though they might feel in your body quite similar.
Absolutely. I think that's why a lot of the people that I know that were in NXIVM haven't even gone to therapy, because a therapist could even say something like, because one thing that we used to say a lot in NXIVM would be like, what do you mean? So you'd say like, well, I don't feel love. And you'd be like, what do you mean? What is love? Can you define it? And then you'd go down this like rabbit hole of trying to put a definition on something. And in that discovery, you'd have what was called an integration. You go like, oh, I'm looking for love. And that doesn't come from the outside world, that comes from within me. And you'd have this big aha. Right. So that, I'm being really simplistic. It was a little bit more complicated than that, but as an example. And so if a therapist says, basically, what do you mean is like, tell me more. Like, it's to elicit,
keep talking.
Yeah, keep talking. And so, I mean, I had a therapist say that on day one. I was like, listen, I just got to tell you, you can't ask me that because that's a huge trigger. Because that type of questioning is what was used in the cult. I've since learned, I've read a book and actually ended up narrating the audible for an incredible book for healing from such things. It's called Take Back Your Life by Janja Lalich. And I actually spoke to her just before I got on this call because I was like, let's talk about shame. I'm going to talk about shame with this guy, Jeremy. And I just need to like, just hash it out in my head for a minute. She's one of my go-to like therapist guru. I mean, not guru, like actual guru, but she's an expert in cult recovery. And, oh man, my brain just glitched. What was the tangent I was on? You were asking me about.
You were talking about red flags from doing the work.
Oh yes.
Now
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. So in her book, she talks about when you get out of a cult, you have to find a therapist that either is an expert in indoctrination. Her term that she uses is resocialization. Nobody uses the word brainwashing anymore in this field. You have to find someone that understands that or is willing to learn. Because if you go to somebody and they don't know anything about cult recovery and they start, especially if you've been in a cult or a group like I was, which is what's based on what's called large group awareness training, where the cult is, it's not a religion. It's not like, it's based on personal development. And there's a lot of groups out there that are cults or culty, like we say in our podcast, but the curriculum isn't about God. It's about, your own success, right? Yeah. A success program. There's tons of them. So if you're, or using a therapeutic based model as part of the curriculum. So when you get out of a therapeutic based model, culty situation and you go to therapy and they start asking you the same kind of questions, you're going to be like, what the fuck? Like, how do I work through this shit? So so I think a lot of people didn't go to therapy because of that. Like the first day is like, oh my God, this is such a trigger.
Have you had benefits from therapy?
Oh yeah. I mean, I had to work hard to find the people that worked for me. But one of them in particular had already counseled a bunch of people from NXIVM. So by the time I found him, and he really helped. I mean, most of the therapy was just explaining how cults work and the dynamics. Like as an example, one of the things I struggled with the most when I first got out was that I just lost all my friends, my close friends, and they were still in and they wouldn't talk to me. And that was devastating to me. And, even just him explaining that their indoctrination and their commitment to the leadership, if you can see it as a sickness, like a mental illness that they have, it doesn't mean the same thing to me anymore. I don't take it as personally. It's like they have a mental illness until they wake up. I had a mental illness. In other words, like I had a false belief system. Yeah. And they have the false belief system. It's not about me personally. So as an example.
And so even just saying that, like I had a mental illness.
Yeah.
How have you been working through forgiveness for yourself and your choices from the past? Like, what is forgiveness to you?
Well, forgiveness, there's a couple layers to that. There's forgiveness for, to others, towards others who I felt betrayed me. So many of the decisions I made to even join and to be a part of this were based on a lie. I was told and believed naively that this man was a celibate renunciate and that he was so integrated, he didn't need sex or didn't need anything physical for his happiness. So I had this, I propped him up in a pedestal as this monk-like character. So there's forgiveness towards them for lying to me. And there's also forgiveness to myself for, what somebody would say, like, well, you're an idiot. Of course he's not celibate. Look at all the women around him. Like there's just obvious things that I can see now that are, it's clear as day what was going on. And, when you watch something like The Vow, when we watched The Vow, it was nauseating. It was horrific because I'm seeing things that I'm seeing it in real time as you are watching it. I didn't see all that stuff. I didn't see him behind the scenes with the women as he's lounging on the couch and like grapes are being dropped into his mouth, proverbially, not literally. Or like how he would meet somebody at volleyball and, stare deeply into their soul and, assault them with his eyes, like if I'd seen that, I would have been, I would hope that if I'd seen that, I would have gotten out sooner. But so I guess to answer your question, for me, forgiveness for others has been letting go of the anger that I had towards them. I still think they need to be held accountable, and they are, in terms of sentencing and probation and jail time and all that stuff. But I'm not angry anymore for me. And that's something that Yanya and I were just talking about this. A lot of people say you have to like forgive, and like, you don't have to forgive the person who abused you. That's something that someone has to come to terms with for themselves. So you can't say like, oh, let it go because it's, that anger is hurting you. It's actually quite normal and healthy to be angry. Whereas in our cult, we were taught that if you were angry, that was pointing to a deficiency. So anyone who was angry or upset was immediately dismissed because they were being reactive. Which is why anyone who like tried to raise concerns, like if I'm going to tangent for a second. One time the one and only time I raised a concern and was outwardly upset about something, because I was a kind of a good girl. I followed the orders and I did everything right. And I was kind of like the poster child for NXIVM. Right. And the year before I left, summer before I left, so like hold on. I don't know the exact months, but in the year before I left, I was at the Vanguard retreat and something happened where people were being promoted. It's a long story, but people were being promoted without having hit the certain criteria, which were very measurable. And I basically realized that Keith could just do whatever he wanted. And there was like nepotism going on essentially. And I was like, I said, this isn't right. And I don't understand. Like we have this measurable system for promotions. Why would we change that now? And I just got pounced on by the leadership, and that people were sent to me to EM them, and people were sent to me to EM me, which is like basically to give me an EM to like,
fix you, basically.
Fix me. Yeah. Fuck with my mind. And I had to fill out a breach form because I was being controlling, and I was anti-tribute and being suppressive towards Keith and all this shit. And I was so angry. And then they say, see, you're angry. Like there's obviously something here for you to work on. I'm like, no, I'm angry because this isn't right. Yeah. Right. And so that's something I didn't realize till later, is that's how they control you is by making your emotions about things that are true for you not okay. So you're just basically numb, and you have to be numb to get through some of the shit that you go through in a group like this. Anyway, so back to forgiveness for myself. I've had to come to terms with what I was going for, what I was looking for that caused me to override the red flags. So in addition to subscribing to the belief system that, my discomfort was something to overcome, I also had to look at, I felt really good there. I felt like I was part of something that was meaningful. I felt a sense of belonging. I felt I found my tribe. It's the word that you used in one of your talks, like the high vibe tribe. And by the way, another tangent. I'm so glad we met now, because if I had met you or seen your TED talk a decade ago, totally would have tried to recruit you, because you would have been, the perfect person, because you have good energy and like you're outgoing and people, and I would have been like on you so hard to come take a training. So this is really,
and I would have completely taken it, because
I bet you would. And you would have risen the ranks. So
I would have loved it. I was, at that time, a PhD student studying psychology, just getting into personal development, all that stuff. I would have been like, oh, training, this sounds awesome. Like, oh, Sarah, you seem so happy and lively and bubbly, and I love your energy. Like, of course,
Right?
I'll go
We
to
totally
this
would have
training.
connected. We would have connected on that level. And that's what we were taught to do that. We were taught to go to like networking events and look for the bright lights.
Yeah, that was an interesting part of the documentary. The leader was saying something like, we don't want the people that can't pay. We don't want the like people who are questioning us. We want the successful, beautiful ones who are thriving. Like that's our demographic.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
awesome.
so I'm glad for that. And just since we're tangenting, I'll tell you one more quick story, because in your TED talk, you talked about how you would leave these love bombs,
notes. Yeah.
These notes. Yeah. So my version of that is, we had to travel to Albany like quite often. And, as you know, in the airport, there's security officers and going through customs where everyone's just kind of dour and, not happy with their lives. So I didn't call it that, but my goal was to, every time I encountered somebody like that, is to do whatever I could to either make them laugh or to make them smile or to change their state just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And
I've literally played that game myself.
Have you?
Airport. Yeah.
I feel like that's where we're similar. So anyway, I was laughing when I heard that, because that we called it like the little magic wand. Like, this is my little magic wand. Can I boop?
Yeah.
Help you have a better day. Boop.
I suppose though, like for you, then it's like perhaps important to recognize like your intention was good. Like at the beginning, like you joined this thing, you were having results, your life was improving, you were meeting amazing people with high energy. Mm-hmm. You found a community of belonging. You found some purpose because you were hitting goals and you were becoming important. Mm-hmm. Like all of that is very reasonable. Like, yeah. And it just like ended up being this crazy sex cult.
Yes.
I mean, but there are many organizations, thousands, I'm sure, that would be just as I described when you start. Like everything, like what would be a red flag then for an individual that's like, hang on, because I want to go to this retreat or I want to go to this workshop or I'm in this space. Like what would be a red flag for the first couple of days or looking back? Like what do you recognize?
I appreciate that question. That's been a huge part of what drives me now is to give people those nuggets, because if I had this template, I would have for sure left on day one. And one of the red flags 100% is in any organization where there's a leader or leadership that claims to have the answers and to figure it out life. Right. And it's the only way. That's a huge red flag. If there's leadership where there's no checks and balances or accountability or, above that or around that leader. And especially if there's any questions raised that are met with gaslighting or met with things like, it's like if that concern is flipped back on the person. If I say like, it's weird that we're all, paying tribute to this one person and I haven't even met him yet. And instead somebody says, well, it seems like you're not being willing to acknowledge what the leaders built, or like what's going on for you that you feel like you need to take him down, no, that's that kind of thing. Or like trust the process, or you're not committed enough. And this happens also in the yoga community a lot where it's about like, you're not doing the work, you got to do the work. It seems like you're not willing to do the work. You're not dedicated enough. Or in the religious groups, it's like, well, you're not, this is God. You're not trusting in God. Like, you don't think God has a plan, or like, it's always like your own concerns and fears that are a problem, not the leadership's problem.
Yeah. Your fears are not valid.
Yeah. Your fears aren't valid. Yeah. It's just a fear. One of the things I was taught is when people had a fear about something, they would say, have you, like, is it possible that you could feel unsafe, but you are actually safe? Which is true. Like I could feel
such a reasonable question. Though,
yeah,
right?
I know. It's all very reasonable questions. Like, is it like, imagine that the gas light is out in your car and you go to fill up, but you actually have gas in your car. It means that your gas light is broken. So sometimes when fear comes up, it's like your gas light's broken, but there's actually nothing wrong. Which could be true. Like I could sit here being afraid that a meteor is coming and there's no meteor coming. Right.
Yeah.
So I could feel So that it pops into
sometimes
your
your
head.
gaslight is broken too.
Yeah.
Like that is a possibility.
It is a possibility.
Right?
Or your gaslight is broken. Yeah, exactly. Your gaslight's broken and you need to get gas, and you got to trust that. So those are some of the red flags. I think also pressure techniques. If you're part of something and they're like, well, if you sign up now, then you'll get the blah, 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 blah. Which is also part of sales, and sales is manipulative to a degree. But if I ever feel like someone's saying, if you do it in the next 48 hours or, next 24 hours, and if you don't do it, then like you're never going to be successful or something, that's a problem.
Yeah. And for you, do you want to talk, what's the word that you used? Collateral.
Yeah.
Do you mind touching on, I think that's an extreme example of a sales technique
yeah. So Keith was like, he even taught us this. He taught us how suppressives, or in the real world, sociopaths work. And he even taught us that the most fucked up people really love the long game. Will like plan something for 10, 20 years because it gives them great gratification. And he even said, and we thought we were talking about other people. We didn't realize he was teaching us about him. That, like, let's say we're neighbors and we're in competition and you do something that I'm jealous of you. I could like key your car or something. And that would give me a moment of like, haha, fuck you. I got you back. Or like long-term, I could plan your demise and set you up for like a big, massive fail on a world level. And that would bring me more joy as a suppressive person. Does that make sense?
Yeah. The vision I went to, like my Dr. Evil was like, I'm going to plant an oak tree right on our fence line, and the roots are going to like lift up in 20 years and wreck your house. And like,
exactly.
And me watering that tree every day gives me a perverse sense of joy.
Right. Yeah. So we actually had a couple of classes that specifically taught about that type of psychology and how it's formed and how it works. We had no idea that was him.
Right.
Yeah. And that's another thing sociopaths do, is they love to tell you what they're doing in plain sight, so you never suspect them.
It's like a game in a sense.
It's a game. Yeah, it's absolutely a game. So what was the question you asked just before that?
The red flags about culty vibes. You were talking about if they have all the answers, if you worship the person, and then we got on a tangent roller coaster, which is fine.
This is my brain.
No, it's all good.
Why did I bring up the sociopath thing?
So they were, I need like an assistant right now that slides me a note. It's like, it was this.
Yeah, ask her this. Yeah, damn it. You would ask me about red flags and oh no, I don't know. Yeah, good. I'm sorry. We'll come back.
It wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to happen. But I was telling you about what he did over time. I don't know. Okay, never mind. He enjoyed it. Let's just say he enjoyed it, and he's still enjoying it. I believe he's in prison enjoying the fact that there's people out there vouching for him, going, no, Keith is misunderstood. It wasn't a sex cult. We all agreed. We agreed to have sex with him, and knowing that he was, and by the way, I did not have sex with him, but the people who had sex with him are still doubled down and saying, no, it was consensual. And that may be for them that it was consensual and they knew what they were entering into, but they haven't yet seen the big picture. Right. Because back to your original question, I'm circling back here for you, Jeremy. There's so much shame in recognizing that you've been conned. And I had to eat that shit sandwich when I woke up and go, oh my God, I was an idiot to believe that. Like the shame, like I can't even go there right now because it's so awful when you really own like 12 years of errors, 12 years of when you recapitulate, this is an axiom word, when you recapitulate your life, or for me, 12 years, you refile all the things that you couldn't make sense of. Mm-hmm. And also to circle back to the sociopath thing, he taught us the way to explain an axiom. And this is a great metaphor when people would be like, but what is it like? How do you like, because we've tried to get people to take the trainings without you to say, just come, trust me, it's amazing. And the best example that I used in my sales pitch was from the movie The Sixth Sense. Keith taught us this. So in The Sixth Sense, if you remember, you're watching it and you're like, this is weird. It's kind of like a thriller. And at the end, you find out one thing. What do you find out at the end, Jeremy? Do you remember?
That he can see dead people.
Yeah, he can see dead people. And not only that, he's been dead the whole time. Bruce Willis has been dead the whole time. And you go, oh, he's been dead the whole time.
It's a big reveal.
It's a big reveal. And then you go back and you watch the scenes and you're like, that's why his wife wasn't talking to him. It wasn't because she was mad at him. It's because she couldn't see him.
He's dead.
He's dead. And you see all these scenes and you go, oh. And that's like, I get actually goosebumps when I even explain this, because that's what we experienced as an integration in the curriculum. You go, oh, that's why my mother, blah, 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 blah. Oh, that's why I've never been able to da, 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 da. And that was what an integration felt like when you integrated something and that you're like, had a aha. And you've probably had this with your clients, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, self-love is that. Oh, right.
Or just myself, where I put my head in my hands like, oh my God, I've been doing this thing I didn't even know.
Right. So that is how we explain the curriculum. But it also is what happened when I got the information at the end of my 12 years that Keith is a sociopath. I was like, oh, that's why, blah, 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 blah. That's why when I had an opportunity to bring this curriculum to Lululemon instead of Landmark, Keith kiboshed it because he knew it couldn't be peer reviewed at that level. That's why they didn't want coaches. And so, like, if you'd come at the level you are as a coach, you probably wouldn't have been let in, because you would have been like, wait, this curriculum is like everything else I've learned. They wouldn't let in coaches and therapists and counselors.
Because we would see that it's not special.
Yes, exactly. And what we were told is that you would steal the curriculum, and we couldn't have that. So we had to protect it. So there was all these things. I'm like, oh, that's why those 5 women were around him all the time. They weren't his assistants. They were his harem. Like, everything just made sense. All the things that I couldn't wrap my head around fit into place. So there's the aha of like a relief almost. And then there's the shame of how the fuck could I have been so stupid? Because when you watch The Vow, it's so obvious, and when you see the big picture, it's so obvious. But when you're in it and you're being head fucked, and you're one thing that Keith was also really good at is everybody siloed in their little spot. Nobody had the whole picture. So the shame of that is quite overwhelming.
Yeah. And the documentary is literally the big picture.
Yeah.
Right. So it's very easy to put all the pieces together, but in the moment, I think another important part was, like, when you were in it, you were scared to talk to your very close friends about these kinds of things. It was because you would have been reported and you would have been in trouble and you would have had to fill out these forms. And so there was this kind of isolated design that was in the system as well, to prevent you from collaborating, from validating your fears, from doing what you ended up doing, which is taking the organization down.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when you were in those spaces, it must have felt lonely despite being part of a community.
Yeah. I actually didn't realize it until I got out, because of the ranking system and where I was in the ranking system, there are certain things I couldn't even freely talk to my husband about.
So just for clarity, you were really high up.
I was what's called a green sash. So there was 12 or 13 greens when I left. And then, I don't know, somewhere between 30 to 50 oranges, which were just below that with proctors. And then 100 or a couple hundred coaches under that, yellows. So I was the highest rank that existed when I left, but within that rank, there's stripes. So I was the lowest of the highest rank, if that makes sense. Gotcha. I didn't have any stripes.
And that meant you couldn't talk to your husband about certain stuff.
Yeah, because he was orange. And there's just I think probably what ultimately did keep me grounded enough and 1 foot out enough to see the truth. It was because of Nippy, and because we were in Vancouver and we weren't like fully immersed. We hadn't made the final commitment to move to the mothership, which was constantly being pushed on me. That was my big breach, that I didn't move to Albany, and that I was choosing comfort and my attachment to materialism, as they called it. This, by the way, this apartment you see behind me. This is my materialism. Was my attachment.
There's like a plant and a picture frame and a couch, some books.
Yeah. They were always like, why do you feel like you need to be in Vancouver to be happy?
Right. So they wanted you closer so they could have more control over you, I imagine.
100%.
Gotcha.
And Keith had other plans for me too, which I didn't know about until I got out.
Are you comfortable talking about?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's public. It's like, I don't even think I knew this when I wrote the book, but in the transcripts for the trial, Lauren, the one who brought me into the women's group, admitted that when she signed me up for DOS for the secret society, Keith told her, you understand that now that she's in DOS, that that her loyalty is now to you, Lauren, which is ultimately to Keith, because he was the grand master behind it all, which we didn't know. And that if she commands me to have sex with another man, I have to do it.
Right.
So that was what I had suspected when I started to put the pieces together, since I had his initials on my body, but I didn't know for sure until the trial, which happened a couple of years later. Right. So that was his plan. I mean, he wanted all the women to himself, but he didn't get me.
Yeah. And so
I have to laugh. I'm sorry. Like,
no,
it's just fucked up. Like I have, sometimes it's awkward and it's like inappropriate, but I'm like, it's also bizarre and hilarious if you can laugh.
No,
that's part of my healing too.
Totally. Yeah. Like release the pressure, however feels comfortable. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you got as close as you possibly could to having to like completely losing your entire life, I would say. Like,
yeah. I mean,
does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you were held down by a bunch of women and they took a soldering iron or whatever and branded your skin. Mm-hmm. And you were in this secret society in which you were calling your best friend master and you were the slave, and there was text messages and lots of stuff was occurring. And it's interesting for me, at least, to consider like, and there was a level above that still, like that wasn't even the peak.
Oh yeah. Like, honestly, Jeremy, sometimes I as shitty as it's all been, and it has been crazy, there's women who had it way worse than me. And I lived in Vancouver, so I could text my master and say, hey, I'm swimming, and take a nap and not be worried that anyone was going to come find me. But the people in Albany, like, they all lived within blocks of each other. So they were being monitored and checked in on. And, in some cases, if I don't know how much you've read about this, but there's one woman that was like locked in a room for 2 years.
2 years.
2 years. Yeah. And actually, technically the door wasn't locked. It was a psychological lock. My husband's whispering something to me. What? Yeah. Oh yeah. My husband wanted me to mention the women who are currently loyal right now had it way worse than me. And they're still loyal. Again, because of the shame that they're going to feel when they recognize that they are wrong and like what they allowed to happen.
That's worse than what they're currently experiencing, is what you're suggesting.
I'm suggesting, well, in essence, some of the women that are loyal were basically his whores. And they're saying to themselves, no, I chose it. I wanted it. It was for my growth. And that's easier than going, oh my God, I was a concubine, essentially, for a sociopath, for, in some cases, like there's one woman who actually is out, who contacted me after the vow. And she was like, she was saying she was grateful that we blew the whistle because she'd been in longer than I was. And she was like, I lived there. I was miserable. I couldn't leave. Every time I tried to leave, I would get an EM. Somebody would keep me in. She was forced to be monogamous with Keith. Like, if you're part of the harem, you can't be with anybody else. So she couldn't have a normal relationship. She was at his beck and call, had to have sex with him whenever he texted. And then she was telling me how awful it was to be exposed in the media, because the media exposed all this, and saying, and then they call me a sex slave, which is crazy. I'm like, no, that's what you were. That's what it was. And she still couldn't. She's like, I'm not a sex slave. Like, no, that's what you're not in a cage.
Right.
It's not, it's a different type of, it's a psychological and physical rape of these women.
So it's
And
not a literal cage.
no, it's not a
it's a
literal cage.
metaphorical, mental, emotional
Yeah.
cage, right?
Yeah.
Yikes.
So in regards to shame, that's, I think, what largely keeps that belief system. Sorry, that's really loud. Do you hear that coffee?
Yeah, but like your husband's got to have some coffee.
Yeah, my husband needs some coffee.
Yeah, we're good.
We're good. He said the husband needs coffee. Jeremy's in support of it.
Yeah.
But is that the end of it?
But like not a lot of coffee.
But not a lot of coffee, right? Just like, could you dial it back? Okay, great.
But I wrote down this quote from your book, and you said, "I have a choice, but I certainly don't feel like I do." It seems like that's a theme throughout a lot of these experiences you're describing. It's like, yeah, I could leave in theory, but like not really.
Yeah.
Right. There's an entrapment.
That's what we have since learned from all the college education, is this thing called this closed loop system of logic that these groups use. And there's like the good and the bad of the nugget of what you learned in the vow, which is the concept of being at cause, being at choice. Like, yeah, that's a great concept. I choose my life. I choose my emotions. I always have choice. I'm sad. I can choose differently. Great. But if you're part of something, you don't have all the information, you're being lied to, you can't actually make proper decisions because you don't have all the information. And if you're upset about something, like, oh, I'm upset that I just found out that I have another man's initials other than my husband's on my body, and I'm angry about that, then somebody can say, well, you're having a reaction. You're just having a reaction. That prevents the abuser from being held accountable, because now it's just about my reaction.
Yeah, it's so manipulative.
It's so manipulative. And ultimately that's what's happening now, is there's the people who are saying, the people who are loyal to Keith are saying that I knew what I was getting into and I had a choice. And my response to that is, if you had said, come join this women's group that's actually started by a man, and you're going to do a bunch of things and not know what's going to happen to you. And that's part of the exercise, is not knowing, and you're going to get a tattoo and you're not going to know what the symbol means, and you just have to let go of everything. And that's what you're committing to. That would be a different thing. But when they recruited people from the beginning based on a lie, then the rest of the contract is null and void, because it's not truthful.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to that point where you were upset about them not following the rules for promotion and whatnot. Like you were pissed off because they were out of integrity.
Yeah.
But you didn't realize that the entire system had no integrity.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And you're like, why are we doing this? And small thing, we're violating our integrity. We're not following the rules. Meanwhile, you're in an entire system of which you don't actually know the real rules.
Yeah. The entire thing is based on the lie.
Yes. Whew.
Yeah. So it's to your question about like shame, ultimately comes back to what you said. And I appreciate that, knowing that for me, my intent is good. I know that about myself. That's something only I know. Can I say that I didn't have human foibles? Like do I want to be liked? Yes. Do I want people to approve of me? And perhaps that caused me to turn a blind eye. Absolutely. That's been a part of my journey, is going like, where did those things come into play that caused me to be in this situation? But then that's also a little bit of like Nexium style exploration to promote a certain type of guilt. Do you know what I mean? Like, one of the things that was good about the curriculum is it taught you in any situation to be able to learn how to take responsibility for your role in it, so that you're not just blaming. Right? Can I give an example?
Please.
Okay. This just happened last week. We were on vacation and we were clearing out the cabins, and my sister-in-law had a big bag of all of her wet laundry from swimming and gave it to my brother and said, put this in the car. This is the laundry. And he didn't hear her and put the big bag of clothes into the garbage. And she lost like $1,000 worth of clothes.
Oh.
Now, somebody could say, oh my God, what an idiot. I can't believe he did that, and be really angry and blame him I was really impressed with her because she was like, well, my responsibility is I put the clothes in a black laundry bag. I could have put it in a clear one, or I could have put it in the car myself. That's like a responsible way of dealing with it, not just being pissed. Right.
Yeah.
And so we would always say, like, in a situation that didn't go right, you seek to look for your responsibility in something. And that gives you more potency. If you blame, you don't have any potency. And I think there's truth in that. So in this situation, they're saying, I am just blaming, and I'm not seeking responsibility. So I do seek responsibility and go, okay, what could I have done? Well, one thing I could have done is to recognize, am I being invited into something in this, what's clearly part of NXIVM, even though they're saying it's not part of NXIVM. Probably Keith is involved because these women can't take a shit without asking him for permission. So like, I trusted that they were telling me the truth. I underestimated their capacity to lie. Right. So I can seek out all these things of what I could do differently. But at the same time, the negative part of that aspect is that it prevents the victimizer or the abuser of taking any responsibility. So I can seek all these ways I could have been different and be more potent. But ultimately, if I'm being lied to from the beginning, there's only so much responsibility I can take. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the people that you trusted, I mean, one was your best friend. They like officiated your wedding. Like, you've known them for a decade, et cetera. It changed your life for the better. And so from zooming out, it's like quite reasonable that you would trust these people because they were the ones that were closest to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question about collateral? I feel like we tangented.
Like, this has been a wonderful tangent roller coaster. So the collateral though was that you made up lies on video. You said like, my husband beats my kids, and you sent naked photos in. And the idea was, this is a consequence that will be released if you don't stay the course, right? Yep. If you're out of integrity, if you don't follow through, if you don't take responsibility, like this is what's going to happen. And like, I do this with clients, but like my version is like, hey, you need to do some burpees, or like, you send me $100 and then when you do the thing, I'll send it back to you. Yeah. This was just an extreme version of that.
Yeah. You had healthy collateral.
Yeah.
And it started that way. It started that way, by the way. Like by the time collateral was introduced, that was the tangent from earlier, the long game. That's what it was earlier. I remember telling you, Keith, the sociopath, liked to do the long game. He started the idea of collateral many years before DOS was even a thing. So by the time it got presented as, you have to give a nude photo as a collateral to hear about this program, just to keep your word, that wasn't that sketchy to me because we'd already been doing it. And it started that way. If you don't complete your goals, you're sending $100 to charity.
Right.
If you don't fall, for me, it was like, if I'm nagging my husband, I'm going to do 10 burpees, like, I don't want to be a nagging wife. I want to like correct that behavior. Like, hey, that's called, behavior adjustment through pain. Right.
Yeah.
It's a way of training. Right. So it was on those premises that these things were presented. And then it just got more and more extreme to the point where people were like sleeping on the floor, taking cold showers, doing burpees in the snow at 5 a.m., things like that. Like, and I never did that either. Like that's the thing. I was a good girl on the outside. On the inside, I was like, fuck that shit. I'm not doing that. Which I think is just why I was able to get out when I did. And I'm not still loyal because I was separating myself during that time. I had like my outer, what's called my cult identity, and my inner self were becoming more and more separate.
Yeah. It seems like despite being in for a decade and at the higher ranks and recruiting thousands of people, you were like never 100%. There was always like a little whisper inside that was like, no, something's not quite right. Something's not quite right.
Well, what I also recognized even wasn't louder than a whisper is there's just things about certain aspects of the curriculum that I just wasn't going to do. And same with Nippy. Like Nippy was like, he was way more outwardly defiant. I was like outwardly, yeah, sure. I'll do that. But then at my center in Vancouver, it's like I had my own little bubble and I did the things that I thought were right. And I didn't do the other things.
Right.
So I think I was somehow able to protect most people from the bad shit, except for the people that moved to Albany. And people did. A lot of people moved to Albany and then I couldn't protect them anymore.
Yeah, I guess that was another piece I wanted to ask you in terms of the shame and regret and forgiveness component is that you individually recruited thousands of people to these things.
That's kind of a tricky thing. I didn't
Okay.
individually recruit thousands. I probably recruited about 100, and then those people recruited people, and those people recruited people. So what was in my the pyramid, the organization was about 2,000. Some of those people I never met.
Right.
If that makes sense. So like if I'm going to take responsibility in a NXIVM style way, I am responsible for all those people because they're there because of me in some way. But yeah, no, that was a huge part of my shame and regret. Is like, oh my God, what did I bring people into? And so then the last 4 years has been about making sure those people are okay. I mean, most of those people are just fine because they just took a 5-day. I'm talking about the people who moved to Albany or had a relationship with Keith or lost all their money. And I'm still cleaning up that mess.
Yeah.
There's the fund for therapy for people who need real therapy. There's a class action lawsuit against the leadership that it's Edmondson versus Raniere. And there's, I think, about 80 of us on that lawsuit. So, trying to get people's money back and, just checking in on people and making sure that they're okay and they have the tools that they need or the books that they need, the resources. That's what I've had to do for my own regret is just make sure that everyone's on track.
And what's life like for you now?
It's kind of weird. Like I don't have a normal life per se. I, deciding to do the podcast with Nippy was something that sort of happened in the COVID world of, here we are at home and we can't travel and what are we going to do? And that basically birthed a new found love for education. And we've been educating ourselves about cults and talked to survivors and people from other groups. And that's been hugely cathartic and also so much more meaningful. Like ironically, our whole mission was to help humanity with NXIVM. And we probably had somewhere between 17 and 20,000 people go through the program, which is not a lot in the reality. And our pod has hit 350,000 downloads. So we're like, this is helping way more than some bullshit personal development program that we thought we were doing. And that's sort of also a bit of a fuck you, right? Like, I'm going to be successful without those tools and help people, actually legitimately help people. So that's really like the big part of my life that's fulfilling and being aligned with other people who are doing similar things. There's a huge cult recovery community. There's a community called I Got Out. If anyone's listening, check out igotout.org. And that's a place where people can go and tell their stories anonymously or with their name if they want to. But it's basically like it's a hashtag movement, like hashtag Me Too, where people are, just to circle back to your initial question, the goal is to blow the lid off the shame that people feel when they leave these groups so that they can go, hey, this happened, because that's why it hasn't been talked about for so long, is that people leave, they recognize they've been conned, and then they go hide under a rock and they never heal and they never tell anybody and nobody knows. And now this is a new wave of people going, oh yeah, I like, because of the vow, especially people are like, that happened to me. That happened to me. And I didn't know that's what it was. But if you want to know what happened to me, watch the vow. Like so many people have told me that. They've just told their friends to watch the vow to explain what happened to them and whatever group they were in. So it's a new wave of people coming out from that shame and just saying that they're not bad people to have let this happen, because most people are just trusting and idealistic. They're not naive and stupid or weak. And trusting isn't a weak thing. But it's also good to educate yourself so you don't trust everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess another angle of that for me is like it gives me a greater opportunity to be compassionate and kind to those who have experienced that thing, when I recognize that I very easily could have joined a cult.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
I very easily could have joined a gang if I was born in a different neighborhood, right? Yeah. Like I'm not this all sophisticated, all knowing person, right? I give myself way too much credit.
I appreciate that, because I still have family members who are like, I knew it was a cult. I'm like, I knew it. And I'm like, really?
Well, you talk about your mom and like one of like your mom going to a meeting with you and like as a therapist, she had her arms crossed and was just whispering annoyances or something like that she could see it. Right. But,
yes.
that's again one of the reasons why perhaps they would not have wanted therapists or coaches to attend.
Yeah. They were very worried about her. No, she knew, but she never rubs it in that way. Like she knew, and she kept me close, so I wouldn't push her away. I'm referring more to people who are like, anyone who thinks it would never happen to them is the most susceptible, because these things happen in all different shapes and sizes, and can, I that's actually one of my sort of favorite things is to realize is when I'm being interviewed by someone who's like, why do people join cults, and what is it about it? And then they mention something that they're a part of that they don't know is a cult.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a cult? What you just mentioned is a cult. And they're like, no, I just do their meditations. I'm like, that meditation is from a group that is a known cult. But you don't know that you're a part of it because the outside looks so great. It's just a meditation mantra. Right?
Yeah. Well, even I was thinking earlier how culture is CULTURE. Like our culture is somewhat a cult. And you were when you were talking about being at the psychologist and going to therapy and healing and all of these things, it's like you're leaving that cult to join like the one that we're all in together. It's like, this is the culture. So like, this is the good one. And it's like, we're all in one already. Like,
we're all indoctrinated.
Yeah.
The question is into what, and how aware are you of it?
Yeah. Have you seen that documentary about Osho back in the 70s?
Yes. Wild, Wild Country.
Wild, Wild Country. Yeah. I watched that and part of me is like, this is batshit crazy. Yeah. And then there's other part of me that's like, man, if I grew up in the 70s, I would be all over that. That looks fucking dope.
Jeremy, you and I are kindred spirits. I said that to Nippy too. I was like, if I'd been in the 70s or 80s and someone invited me to that community, I'd been all over it. I love that stuff. Super fun. Community. I mean,
give me the orange outfit.
You know what? I actually, in kindergarten, one of my best friends was from Rajneesh, and she was always wearing orange, red, and pink. And I was like, those are my favorite colors when I was 6. I was like, this is dope. I totally would have been all over that. But, and actually I use this as a great example. I'm glad you brought it up. With Wild, Wild Country, most of those people didn't know what the leadership were doing. So
they were just playing basketball and smoking weed. And,
having open, fun relationships. I mean, what's not to like? But I use that as an example a lot, because the filmmakers, I think, while it's controversial and some people think it didn't take a hard stand, it left people to think, well, is it good or is it bad? Yeah. What was that? And I think ultimately the same thing happened with us. Most people didn't know what the leadership were doing, and which is why it's hard when people, and the media especially, like sex cult, like we weren't in a sex cult, but we actually were. So we didn't know that it was a sex cult, but most people who took the curriculum were like, ridiculous. I'm in a goals program.
Right.
I'm in a goals program, and
my career.
It's my career, and people at high level and people in political office, and, A-list celebrities. Like it gone to a high place. So that's why most people don't want to have any affiliation with it, because who wants to be affiliated with a, nefarious sex cult?
Yeah. if like Osho branded it as that, it's like, come move to this place and join our sex cult. Like that's not how it works, right? No. It's much more subtle, and they're really sophisticated in the ways that they identify who you are, your weaknesses, your strengths, and they tug at those strings in a really sneaky way.
Exactly. And well, that's the through line with all these groups, regardless of the content, whether it's religious or political or therapy based, is that there's a bait and switch. So it's I'm presenting one thing and actually it's another. And if they were to actually say at the beginning what it was, you wouldn't sign up. So it has to be a bait and switch. Right. I see this with MLMs, and it happens in, sketchy sales stuff all the time. And in relationships, you present one thing, but it's actually another.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine your antenna or your sensitivity to these kinds of things would be just at a very heightened level all the time.
It's very heightened. And that's when you ask me what my life is like now. I'm much more skeptical. I do not like anything in a group. And I've had to be very careful with my friendships and who I let close to me. I have a much more smaller circle of friends now than I did before.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I have a mom. And that focus is like really what's kept me going the most is that I have these two beautiful children and an amazing husband and this beautiful family to focus on. And I'm lucky enough to also be a voice actor, which is very short periods of time for a good amount. Like I can live off of my voiceover work. Then that allows me to, do the podcast and other creative passions.
Yeah, we didn't even touch on that. Like you're in Hallmark movies. And your voice is in commercials and all kinds of shows and stuff.
That's why I say my life is weird. Like I'm doing a Hallmark movie and then I have like a podcast about cults. Like it's a very juxtaposed life. And to switch in and out of those things is bizarre.
Yeah.
For me, but it's interesting and it's every day's different. It's not a 9 to 5. Yeah.
I imagine there's not too many like you, Sarah.
The closest I've met is Leah Remini, and she's my cult bustin' actor hero role model.
Yeah, so she was the one that was in Scientology and then exposed it and had a TV show and whatnot.
Yeah. And she's a mom and she's a badass. And we had her on, she was one of our guests on our podcast. And that was like amazing. Dream come true.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome.
You were just swooning the whole time.
Oh, I was like, just trying not to be a total I was like, I love you. So Leah, tell me about Scientology.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and
my
your
pleasure.
energy. And I just have so much admiration for what you've gone through and who you are. Like
thank you.
It's just such an impressive journey you've walked. And I could talk to you for hours. I have like more questions. But I'm like, wait, you were questioned by the FBI for a couple of days, and like literally your photo was on the front page of the New York Times. Like, you've had just so many circumstances that most people in this lifetime will never have any taste of. And to you, it was true. It was just like this normal. Like, that's my life. I have to like feed my kid and change a diaper, and also respond to these comments because I'm on the front page of the New York Times about a sex cult right now. It's just like, it's such a surreal existence. It must be incredible, but I just,
you really
I
nailed it
you.
right there.
Yeah.
Every now and then I'm like, wow, my life is bizarre. It makes for great dinner conversation when you meet new people.
Yeah. Like in The Vow, there's this scene where you're like online and your child walks up to like nudge you and you're kind of like giving your kid attention. You're coming back and like, at that moment, you're literally bringing down a criminal organization. Yeah. You're responding to media requests around the world. It's like, wow, that's just, I remember watching that. Just like, what a weird life. It's so weird, like in a good way. Yeah. Like, wow, that's just so unique.
It is. It's definitely a unique life. In some ways, I would never change it. Like, obviously there's decisions I'm like, well, wish I'd made a different decision there. But ultimately I really love my life. And this is very meaningful and purposeful. And it was just a strange way to get here.
Yeah, and then like you're helping lots of people. It's like it's like that old idea of be careful what you ask the universe. It's like you wanted to affect thousands of people, you wanted to change lives, you wanted to have a family. It's like you got it, just not in the way you anticipated, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah. Where can people find you? How can they help you? How can they support? What do you?
Oh, that's very kind. They can find me on Instagram. It's Sarah Edmondson, like son of Edmund. And then our podcast is at A Little Bit Culty on Instagram. A Little Bit Culty. And you can listen to that anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Sure.
I'm one of the founding members at igotout.org, which is a wonderful place for people who are recovering from cults. And also on my website, I have a number of resources that link to all the different places that I'd send people to if they need help. We raise money for therapy for people who are recovering from NXIVM. Nippy and I have a Cameo account, which is really bizarre that people even want us to send them Cameo videos, but they do. And that goes for therapy. And my book, if you want to hear the whole story, I think it's cool that it's on Audible because I narrated it.
I mean, you're a voice actor.
And I'm a voice actor.
It's gotta be good.
I think it's pretty good. It was my first one that I narrated. They were like, should we cast somebody else? I'm like, no, I'm a voice actor. I would have been myself. Right? I know. I think that's a cool read. It's only like 8 hours or something. That's about it.
The book is good. Like I read the book.
Thank you.
It's good. Yeah, it's really well done.
Pass it on to someone who you think might be in a cult.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the question is, what do you do? Like, what's the best approach if you're worried genuinely about somebody and you fear that they are like?
Well, first thing is don't tell them that. do some research and find and get more like hard data, as they say. If it's somebody who's close to you and you want to do an intervention, there's some people I recommend on my website that you go to who can like actually do an intervention with them properly. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you can try to do an intervention, then it just push them away. Yeah. But the best thing is to not judge and be compassionate and ask questions in a very loving, inquisitive, curious way. That and one of the main questions I've learned is to ask people like what they signed up for. You know, to just to say like, is this what you signed up? Like, so you thought you were getting a personal development program, and now, so did you think that you were going to have the initials of the leader on your flesh when you signed up for that? Like, I mean, I'm being sarcastic a little bit, but you know, those are the types of things to ask, like to help the person recognize that they've gone down a dark path. But you can't say you're in a cult, because we were trained how to answer that from day one.
Right. And it touches right on their shame, and it's not the way to do it. Yeah. All right. Well, this was great. To be continued. Maybe we can do another one. I mean, you want to come back on and jam about cults anytime or anything, really? I mean, yeah, I'd be happy to have you back for sure. Thanks, Jeremy. Thanks for the great questions, and I do appreciate you doing the deep dive, because we can have a different type of conversation. Yeah, actually, it's more fun. I should have stated that. Maybe I'll say that in the intro. I'll explain. Okay. Like, Sarah gave me homework, and I did the homework, and this interview is a result of that. Gold star. I'm gonna give you your orange sash and a first rate. Oh dear. All right. Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks, Jerry. Keep in touch. Yeah, take care. Goodbye. So that was Sarah Edmondson. As mentioned previously, she is featured quite heavily, maybe the main character in that HBO documentary series called The Vow. She has a new book out, which I've linked to in the show notes. Yeah, what a life, and what a vulnerable, authentic share from her, right? Thank you for being here. Thanks for listening. I appreciate you. If you could leave me a 5-star review on the podcast, that would make all the difference in the world. I appreciate you subscribing so that you don't miss an episode, sending it to friends and family. Maybe you've got someone in your world that loves cults. Maybe you can point her or him or them in the direction of Sarah and her podcast, which is all about cults. Anyway, that's me. You can find me on Instagram at longdistancelovebombs. I adore you. I appreciate you. And thanks for being here.